I was picking lemons and then looking at SpaceX, and I thought, well, let's just make some lemonade out of this. Everybody's always tweeting. Our jobs are tweeters. We're SpaceX influencers. Yeah. Mine's a long story, you guys. I didn't just get here. This is not my first rodeo for Boca Chica, but I guess my story started back when I went to Alaska when I think I left when I was 17, going on 18. Then I arrived right before I turned 19. That's how hard it took for me to get there. I had to work my way to Alaska. It was during the worst recession of the United States besides the Great Depression. It was 71, 72, yeah. And then I made it to Alaska at the end of 72, 73. And it was so bad that there would be days where I hadn't eaten. It was, you had to work for, the unemployment. I would look at those unemployment lines in every city I went to. Omaha, Nebraska, the unemployment line was 3 blocks long. And there was soup lines, soup kitchens. That's what kept me alive, was the Catholic churches had food banks and soup kitchens. And I would put things in my backpack and move to the next city and try to find more food. Anyway, to make a long story short, when I got to Alaska, there was food everywhere you looked. All I needed was a 30-06 rifle, a fishing pole, and a boat. And that was about top of my list, and I slept in a tent. And money was flowing in before I knew it. And then I got a cabin on a little isolated island that I took a boat to, and had a crab pot and enough money for gas every day. And then I was working on harbor boats, and then I was working on ships, and then I was moving my way up through the Coast Guard. Then I started a family, and then I built a road, and then I built a little house, and then I was,
That perfectly explains how you get on perfectly well here.
Yeah.
Because you know how to survive, how to follow everything.
Well, not only that, but I worked with heavy equipment. I drove dump truck, I drove ships, I drove boats, I drove tugboats. I knew engine rooms. I knew what I was looking at. So when I'm filming, I want to film something that I know. You know what really got me was the cranes.
For me too.
Yeah, because I went to, I got my crane certification up with the Exxon tankers, Exxon Mobil, and you had to be certified in all the deck equipment. And so crane work was hard. It's not fun to pass those certs. You got to know ratios. You got to know how to rig them. You got to maintenance them. It's a lot of work. So a lot of people don't take that initiative. They just let someone else run the crane. But and then I always wanted to be a dock shoreside worker at one point. And cranes are where the money is. The shipyard work is basically where I worked. And that's why I always called the production site the production shipyard, because they did the same kind of work. Ray and I woke up one morning and we just like, are we on the ship? It sounds just like a shipyard in dry dock. And the beep beep cranes, the hollering, the clanking, I'm like, the pounding. I says, we didn't retire. We're still in a shipyard. We're still in a shipyard. But I was born 40 years too late. And this is a young man's game, young woman's game.
I'm just thinking that we're talking about 70s, right?
Yeah, there was no women.
Exactly. That was a different world.
No, I had a really good backhand. Yeah, nobody got too close behind me. Yeah.
Steel man's game, right?
Oh, they were brutal. They were brutal. You had to be brutal back. Yeah. The knife went in here. Always. I always had a knife in my boot. I carried a wheel wrench on my belt, and that. Yeah. Someone's tried to weasel in while you're working and you're busy or whatever, you just cold cock them as fast as you can and just pretend nothing happened. And they're pretty forgiving, or else they go to prison. Yeah. And there was a couple of women that were brutally raped on the ships because they were too nice. They were just too nice. And as much as you would like to love your shipmates, it only goes so far. But I have sailed with the worst of men and respected them for what they do. And I was a sailor girl and worked my way up through the ranks as a licensed officer and retired as a chief mate. So that was pretty good track record for no women on ships. There's a bravery that has to come with it. Like when you're standing next to a snake, it's either you or this rattlesnake. And if they don't back off, and you can't back off, they got you cornered. But usually, you can find a way out in the wilderness. I think bears were my absolute worst in the wilderness. And we don't have enough time for that. So that's a book I gotta write. But basically in Alaska, you have to wear all the hats if you want to get something done. So when we came down here, Ray and I shared a lot of hats. Like right now, he's over in the village putting up curtains for my girlfriend. I mean, he's a carpenter. He's put in bathrooms. He was a chief engineer on the ships when I met him. I mean, everything you could imagine has to be certified to get through the ships. And the biggest one that has to be constantly upgraded is firefighting. So when I saw things happening in the development of SpaceX, it was just irking Ray and I in the beginning years because they weren't doing things in a safe manner in those early days, and they didn't want to have to do it. They wanted the cheapest, fastest, expedient route they could do. And that wasn't OSHA, that wasn't firefighting training, but then they morphed. I mean, the bigger they got, the more they morphed. And we saw that before we left, that they had morphed. I mean, they were dropping hammers on their heads in the early days. And then they'd go at it with each other. You son of a... And just, it'd be in the middle of the night, we're hearing this raging fight go on, and you could hear the hammer coming. I don't know why the guy in the hopper couldn't hear the hammer coming, because we heard it in our bedroom going ding, 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 and then bang, and it was just that simple, just stupid stuff. So people were going, "You're crazy. What the heck are you talking about?" And there was only really one person in my life that knew what I was talking about, and that was the priest at our church and up in Alaska. And we'd go home to Alaska to get the other part of our lives on the ships, or else our rental units. And I would talk to her about this adventure we're having in the wilderness, and we're building this Mecca, this little villa. And she goes, "Yeah, have you heard of Elon?" And I said, "Oh my God, he's going to be my neighbor." And she said, "Is this a good thing?" I said, "Well, maybe he'll bring water to the table, who knows? Making life less wilderness, because we were literally carving our lives out of the wilderness. We were living with snakes and critters and coyotes and ne'er-do-wells, criminals, drug dealers. I mean, it was wilderness. It was the wild, wild west. Yeah, and you've heard about American gun laws. Well, this is why, everybody packs a gun. So by 2015, we knew a little bit more, and the pictures were now really catching things that people were starting to actually believe me, and other photographers, especially in the village, were starting to pay attention to what I was documenting, this early history on. Then it was on Facebook on Maria Pointer, and now I got the SpaceX Boca Chica page. And now everybody's happy in the family, and I quit posting all the SpaceX stuff on the Maria Pointer Facebook page. But if you go back on that page to 2012, you'll see weird little pictures of tall grass with a sign or a survey stick, which I thought was a big deal back then. I thought it was, progress. When right outside this little rental unit here that we're sitting in, right across the street and to the right just a little bit, was one of the first big major pictures I put on there with a truck doing a hydrology drill, and they were doing a hydrology study. And I had my little peanut butter and jelly sandwich on my bicycle and my little cell phone, and I stopped and I talked to them, and they said, well, we're not supposed to talk to anybody. And I said, well, I'm just not anybody. I'm Boca Chica, Maria, and I live here. I live right there. And he goes, oh, okay, well, we're on an NDA, their non-disclosure clause for SpaceX, but they said that they're going to put ground antennas at that site, and they're going to do the hydrology study for the whole area. So I got in on the ground floor with these people, and then because our house was on the highway, on Highway 4, we were the very last house in Texas. I mean, if you went by our house, you hit the beach, and that was it. And we would walk and ride our bicycles to the beach every morning. Ray would jog and run 9 miles down to Mexico and back. And I was the only house that looked kind of like SpaceX. I mean, we had a nice little home, a nice little garden, trees, palm trees, fruit trees. And so all the trucks would stop at our house. All the deliveries would stop at our house. So I got everybody's scoop. I knew who was delivering. I'd bring coffee out at 6 a.m. when people would be waiting for SpaceX workers to arrive, and they literally were lost. They had no idea where SpaceX was. And one of the security guards kind of got in a tiff with the driver about talking to me. And the driver said, hey, she was just being nice and helpful. So I called Alma over at SpaceX, and I said, I don't mind helping. I'm retired, you're not. So, basically I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. I said, why don't you get gate signs or delivery signs? And bingo, that's when the gate signs came, and they started putting gate entries up and sentries up. And another reason why they put the gate guards up there wasn't in those days for people like you and me trespassing. It was for the illegals. It was for the drug traffic. They were trying to push the drug traffic back up towards Brownsville, but what it did is it pushed it for a little while down to the beach. And I was a tracker. I'm still a tracker. I'm always a tracker. But I used to track all the drug traffic and the footprints, how many males, how many females, who was carrying what, basically. And they figured the only way they got by that sentry down at the launch site was he got a new boat. We don't know, a Tesla. But there was a lot of traffic that morning, and I talked to the guy, and I asked him. I said, "How are you gonna deal with this? I mean, is someone gonna come after you? I mean, I wouldn't worry about SpaceX." And we're talking back up until 2018, you guys. Yeah. So there was. So and when I did talk to Elon at length at one time, and we did cover that conversation, and he took it seriously when I told him what he was up against, especially with the cartel working within his people, because his people that he hires have people from Matamoros, and if they need a favor or whatever, they just kidnap a relative until they get the favor. That's how it works. That's the cartel in the area. So if they need something from Elon, I said, are you willing to negotiate with them? Because you have to. I mean, you have to give them. And he goes, no, we've got that covered. And I said, no, I don't think you do. I said, you don't realize what these people are sacrificing for you by working for you. And then when the cartel comes to them, it's their family that'll be murdered, not yours. Yeah. And he goes, well, we pay attention to that. And I said, well, I hope you're paying attention now if you weren't paying attention before, because even my hairdresser worries about this with her grandmother. I mean, this is an area-wide thing. So, you know, back in those very early days, I couldn't say a lot about this because we still live there. And, well, they still know where I live. I started taking stupid little pictures with an ugly little BlackBerry phone, and then I upgraded to a Samsung, and, you know, the drill. So I would always go out around 11 o'clock at night, just out my door, and shoot in the tents. And of course, the haters and the competition would say that should be criminal. And I thought, well, it's in my backyard. You know, if I can't look, it's my own property. And then I started taking walks when I saw better pictures. And then other photographers started following me because it was really interesting work. I was seeing things and people were making sense of it. Retired engineers, space enthusiasts, very smart people were seeing what I was posting. Another competition was posting by now. But the camera lens just outside my door was just insane. I had to prioritize because I had a wilderness to maintain. I had a vegetable garden. I had, you know, trees to maintain, and it was not easy carving a wilderness, even though it looked beautiful. So I was busy and I was filming, and I kept a camera on a tripod 24/7, and I was the cameraman. So after dinner, I would sit on this little computer and try to learn how to edit and paste everything together and put it out there on Facebook. And then I tried YouTube, and I so sucked at it. So I needed a camera to help me. I couldn't film it all, especially after the rings started being constructed and the tent work. And I had my really good eye angle on lens work that a 24/7 camera couldn't get. Now we're a community, and I really now feel how this is going to grow. And that was so important, that if Elon's going to come, is there going to be a minimum wage guarantee? Is there going to be students that are going to know what skills or trades they're going to need? Is there going to be, none of this was getting out there. And I'm kind of like, maybe the cameras will help me, you know? So they did, they really did. I reached teachers immediately with camera feed out of our bedroom window. And another thing in those very early days is Elon, he was always posting my pictures, and his mom was posting my pictures. And that's when I started out my bedroom window and making lemonade out of lemons. I don't know if you remember those early hashtags. Yeah, because I was picking lemons and then looking at SpaceX, and I thought, well, let's just make some lemonade out of this. This is, you know, and we had to have a business to pay ourselves back. And so in those early days, I was very worried about how I was going to merge my bird sanctuary viewing stand, which we were building a big viewing stand and a bed and breakfast in the shop, and SpaceX. Well, believe it, I didn't need any bird sanctuary because there was enough SpaceX to fill up every square foot of our property. And I would hold these humongous media gallery events. For some of this, now looking back, it was just trivial little things, but so exciting leading up to the Hopper. Okay, so imagine this. You wake up and you look out your bedroom window and they're building the Hopper. Yeah. Right out your bedroom window, and the guy waves to you from the top of it. And you're standing there in your nightie. So
did it change a lot?
It did.
When the Hopper.
It did. It did. It was new.
There she goes.
It's new science. And you think it's going to go less, but as it goes up, it gets
She's up.
bigger.
She's up.
It gets thundering on your
I can hear a
chest.
blast.
And I'm like, I don't want to be here. I was like, maybe I should have went in the backyard. It was different. I wasn't expecting that.
So freaking cool. Oh my God. My skin is just prickling. Where'd she go? Oh, there she is. I'm doing it. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
And the CBS News guy was watching me, and he had this kind of little smirk on his face. And I looked at Miles and I said, you were waiting for my reaction, weren't you?
It really happened. Just in my front yard. This is so crazy.
And then on SN5, I was standing with the SpaceX crew filming. I was invited to film with the SpaceX crew. And those guys were just wild dogs. I mean, just like, "Ah, look at it, it's still standing."
Still standing.
The dust came up in our face. It was like, well, we all looked at each other like, maybe we should move back. I'm protecting my camera, before me, but and I kept rolling. I didn't abandon my station. And on SN8, I was invited by SpaceX to take a room on South Padre Island, and I didn't like that because Everyday Astronaut was over to my left. And he kept screaming so loud that in all of my videos, it was like, there she goes, there she goes. And I'm like, ooh. So I might as well have just given my footage to Tim. He lives next door to me anyway. I could have just walked over the disc. And then on 9, I was over at my Starship Station on the river, and I was getting ate to death by chiggers. So I was having to stand real still and manually track for, I think it was the most god-awful 8 minutes. What was it? An H chigger bite just hurt worse and worse after. I said, land that sucker, just land it. I was in a marshland. And then on 10, it got delayed. It landed and then exploded. Yeah, and someone turned my camera off, thinking they were turning it on. So I missed the explosion. And that was an easy track. I mean, people have computer programs like you to track. I need that because I'm manually.
Our manual.
Oh, I'm manual, and it is hard. It is scary. The least little jolt, you can lose the rocket because you're zoomed in so tight. So 11 was kind of disappointing because I was talking to SpaceX before the Wednesday before 11. SN11. And on Friday, the FAA didn't show up.
Oh, that was that.
And they wanted to get rid of 11. They had moved on to 15.
Yeah.
And 11 was in their way. And there was a big meeting because I was standing right there when everybody came out of the meeting. And one of them came over and got to talk to me, and he felt privileged to talk to me, and I felt privileged to talk to him. And so we had a great time, and it just went on for like an hour. I got to hear all about the fire department's decision and where the stairways were going to go in High Bay, and he goes, why did we need a second? I said, because you need a secondary exit. It's OSHA. And he goes, oh, how do you know? I asked, because I was in the maritime. I worked with, Anyway, it was, and he goes, well, I got to catch a plane. I says, what? You got to catch a plane? you're not going to stay for the SN11? And he said, no. And I said, it's not going to fly, is it? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, good. I said, and why aren't you staying? And he goes, because I got a whole lot to do. And I said, like, I'm going to buy all that bullshit? I said, why aren't you staying for SN11? And he goes, well, I've just got to get back. And I said, I don't buy that. I said, SN11's not even important, is it? And he goes, well, we got to get it out of the way. You know, let's launch it, let's practice, let's do the drill. We need the skills, we need the timing, we need all that. And then the FAA didn't show up, and so that added to it. And then on Sunday, the weather moved in, and they blindly flew it. I've been to a few launches, and I kind of know what it sounds like when it gets close to the ground. You hear, it's almost like the Doppler radar system on a ship, the return sound, and you can start hearing when the rocket starts closing in. I can discern that noise, but the rocket didn't get to the ground, and it blew up. And I look at my sound technician that was with me, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and I said, they detonated. And she goes, they sure did. I'm sure they knew they weren't on the mark, and they were blind, and they hoped to detonate it before it just destroyed the launch site. And when they detonated, I think they kicked the stern out across the road. But what they didn't know is the ecological damage. They didn't know the lichen food chain needed for that population of birds. And they didn't know what the tire tracks do to the lichen food chain. And I know this for a fact because I was giving valuable input to a cleanup campaign with the Parks Service and trying to get SpaceX to commit to helicopter cleanup so that they wouldn't make the deep tire tracks. And they weren't that smart in those early days. They are now. They know now that they've got to use those golf cart tires that don't compress the bay, and it has impacted the bird population because of that. But at the same time, I'm sure, and I'm assuming, so don't get me wrong, I have no scientific proof, that SpaceX had to quickly discern the least collateral damage, and they picked the wrong one. They should have destroyed their launch pad. I told everyone in Brownsville that I talked to that I don't just tell you the good things that's going on out here. I tell you everything that's going on out here. I tell you when people are moving after being scared to death of being eminent domain. I tell you when the watershed is being corrupted and being flooded out, and immediately SpaceX jumps on it, takes care of it. They're a responsible, I'm so glad it's a responsible company, because I would have had a hard time getting behind a not so green concept. So, I mean, we're making fuel from the air. We're making reusable rockets, and nothing's perfect in the beginning. It's a steep learning curve for SpaceX. I think Elon said that space is not easy, or rocketry is not easy. Space is hard. Space is real hard. And he'll take any idea he can get. He took ideas from me. I was like, ooh, that's pretty interesting. So Elon created that mania, that Elon needed so many people to support those first early concepts that he got those young minds engaged into thinking just outside the box. And now these people, 10 years later, have developed and designed companies that support the infrastructure that SpaceX needs. He got you over here.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
And Elon needs that. He needs those corridors to grow. And I feel so proud of SpaceX, even though they took my house. You know? Long before SpaceX came, there was a committee called the Port of Brownsville Spaceport Commission, and they passed all these laws that would influence space corridor development because Willacy County had a successful launch. They didn't want the space corridor, so they passed laws against it. Brownsville said, hey, we'll do a space corridor. And smart Brownsville, they were forward thinkers, and they had a huge port development proposed for the next 25 years. So they were in growth thought. They were thinking forward mobility, and they passed these laws that if a space corridor comes to us, you can't do this, you can't complain, you can't block it, you can't call and say it's after 11 o'clock, tell them to turn the lights out. We were screwed. I mean, but at the same time, you can't just say, oh, well, there's no one here to help me. Well, we didn't do our homework when we developed this property, because the minute they said SpaceX was awarded this property, we knew we had to get along. Just because I'm a futuristic person, and I hope everybody watching this, if they're on the fence about what's good and bad in the world, you have to pick your battles. And Ray and I, we were being shoved out of our house by SpaceX, but we had to pick our battles. And SpaceX wasn't our battle. You can always get a house somewhere else. It's not going to be in the wilderness. But then we have found some pros and cons since those days that we didn't know then, that we know now. And one of those is we aged really fast in the last 10 years. 2020, there was no more sleeping. I had already had major surgery once on the spinal cord, and I had another surgery scheduled, but because of COVID, we didn't know where that was going to go. My husband had health issues. He had survived cancer, so he was on the mend, and we needed the lights out. We needed some peace and quiet. So once you hit 65, it goes downhill really fast. And we're kind of glad we're on that side of the channel, because I still see SpaceX from my back door, still in my backyard, hashtag. Well, I'll tell you, Ray and I are having a hard time with that, because this is the first time we've ever lived in that habitable area. It's very populated where we're living. And I warned my neighbors, I am not used to neighbors. You will hear me do and say things, and I have a potty mouth. I am a sailor girl. And I talk to myself, and I cuss to myself, and I can't even go on some chat rooms because I get the bot, the potty mouth bot. So, and I don't even know I'm doing it. Like when the big boom went off, enjoy the boom, hashtag, the overpressurization. I was chatting to someone and I said, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And all of a sudden, bot. I'm like, they didn't get the point. That was a big boom, I inspired Felix to do what he did because I saw how well Kevin Haymeyer was doing with my material. And so I said to Felix, do you want some more? Do you want exclusives? Do you want, And I became who I was, and they used my stuff entirely. I've got two guys that watch my Discord channel that, bless their souls, can tell me more than anybody's told me forever. I've got a researcher on a chat group. That's it. And my producer, he's rebuilding his house, so he has no time for Maria Pointer. There's just so many things that go into supporting a space corridor, down to the very little cottage industries like me, like what I'm doing with VIP tours and having a media gallery on the Rio Grande River with the Starship Station. That Starship Station is the only place where people can bring their campers and get ready for watching a test or watching a launch. We had every local, state, and national news team represented in either print or media, film, TV crews. I mean, it's wilderness. It's very inhospitable. It's really hard to survive out here if you don't have just a little bit of support. That's all you need is a little bit of help, like a sandwich or hydration. We're not saying anymore. In the earlier days, it was just ants crawling on top of themselves. I mean, it was just young whippersnappers trying to get the best picture, trying to outdo the competition. They would literally stalk me to see where and when I would get the picture. Like, I knew when the sun was hitting something, and I knew when to spy into a tent, or I knew when the light was right for the tent, or I knew when the morning sun. I mean, people even started copying my sunrise positions, and they had a plan. I didn't have a plan. I was just out there being grandma, taking pictures and having a good time. And not only that, what I did really worked because everybody did the same recipe that I did. It was funny watching how people just watch you and then I can do that better. Oh, I have a better camera. Oh, I can stand the heat. Fine, go for it. It's not my job. I'm retired. It just happened out my bedroom window. I just started it. I don't have to finish the race. I just started the race. I'm almost 70. I would be the first grandma to go to the moon if I could. I would be the first grandma to dock yes, if I could go to the moon. I've docked ships. I would love to dock a spaceship.